Hey, what's up, everybody? It's Brendan Housler with EVOQ Bike. We are trying to make a TT bike fast. I'm super stoked. Just bought a Cervelo P Series. And before we jump into this podcast, I have to give a shout out to Matt Winstead, who talked to me for about 45 minutes about so many small details in the TT world that maybe I'll try and put a blog post together of everything he told me about. But I ended up getting the frame, got a Vision bars front end. I need to figure out my really dimensions of everything before I consider going Gucci style with the front ends. That if you see the Jumbo Visma team, that front end that they are riding on, I believe on the website is $7,000 or $8,000 for the front end alone. That's insane. So I won't be buying that. But I've talked to some other friends that are big in the TT world, and they have, Aero Coach, and I can't remember the name of the other one. And then we started talking about chain rings, and then we talked about wheel widths, depths, all this other stuff. Do you need a tri-spoke, blah, blah, blah. And so I'd reached out to Zach Gregg, who is a previous podcast guest, and he has obviously won some huge time trials, national champion. And he said, "Oh man, I'd love to help you try and soup this thing up." And I said, "Well, can we record this as a podcast?" And he said, "Yeah. Ooh, hey, let me get Brendan Rhim on this. He's super fast also." So Brendan Rhim's also been on the podcast as a guest. So thank you to Zach and Brendan for coming back, helping drop some gems of just the T2 world. It's not little things. We talk about the aero suit. Don't stretch it out all the way. There's a reason why. What about socks? What about the width of the tire? Where can you save some money? Where should you spend more money? It was really interesting to me. So I was really intimidated about this bike. It's like trying to piece together something where all these little choices make a big deal, but it's like, hey, this wheel is $2,500. This one's $1,250. What's really the difference? And I'm coming from, I do a ton of road racing. I take it very seriously. I ride Ultegra because to me, Dura-Ace is just not worth it, especially because I ride so much. And if I crash, I don't want to spend that much on a new rear derailleur. And so it's like, is it really that much of a difference? So anyways, enough of the intro. Let's get into it. Zach, Brendan, thanks so much. Matt Winstead, thank you again. And everybody, if you are ripping some TTs, I hope to see you next year. See ya. So this is part of what sparked this TT love. I was like, I tried to ride a gravel bike and it was pure pain. I was like, okay, I don't even know if I really love gravel anymore. And so I was talking to somebody about getting another bike and haven't had a TT bike in 6 years maybe. And it was a hand-me-down from Grant Kuntz actually. And that was a hand-me-down from somebody else. So it didn't really fit. And I thought, I don't know, maybe I would think about this. And then I reached out to Zach of, hey, I've got some questions and want to pick fast people's brains on just a couple. I didn't think it would be so complicated to get this set up. And that's when the bike shop here, they sell Cannondales and Cervelos, and I wanted to support them. So I ended up getting the Cervelo. And I guess thankfully they couldn't get the full bike. I thought the little arrow thing looked fast, and so, I forget who I was talking to. Matt Winstead. He said, "Oh, you don't want that. You get the frame, and you want to buy everything else." And so then he got all these wheels spinning, and that's when I reached out to you. And so yeah, and then I figure this is a good podcast because if other people want to get into a time trial, all these little things I didn't think matter, people are saying, "Oh no, that matters. That matters. That matters." So, how do you, I don't even know where to start with this. I mean, I guess we kind of were talking about gearing, crank length, cockpit, wheels, and then if we have time, the miscellaneous like helmet, skin suit, shoe covers. Do I really need to focus on that as well?
Yeah. I think the key tenet of all of this is that body position contributes the most to aerodynamic drag and potential aerodynamic efficiency. So picking parts that allow you to fit really comfortably on your bike and ride and train your bike is the most important part of all of this. So I think the Cervelo seems like it's a really long kind of stretched out bike, especially in a large XL size, and you can kind of like take the UCI restrictions and like max them out and be really comfortable on it. because you can be the fastest person in the world in the most aerodynamic position in the world and be really uncomfortable, and it's not fun, and you won't train on it, and then you can't do any power. So I think body position is the thing that's most important, and especially at the speeds that Brendan races, right? Especially on the track, like every yeah, every small aerodynamic gain becomes exponentially more important, but you also have to ride at 600 watts. So that's kind of where I start.
For 30
right?
seconds.
Like, for 12 minutes, 600 watts.
And,
What's yeah, if you saw that America's Cup, the 500 watts for an hour. How often do you guys, and I guess for me, I won't be doing 600 watts for 30 seconds. I'll be focusing on road TTs and probably Masters Nats. If Pro Nats is not far, maybe I would go and just be like, hey, maybe let me see if I can get in the top 30. I don't know. In which case I'd have to pay attention to the UCI rules. But then, like, we're talking, just P12 state champs, things like Carter County, Omniums. There were 4 or 5 races where I thought, damn, I want a TT bike. And that's kind of where I was at with that. How often do you recommend that people actually ride the TT bike then?
You want to go, Zach? It pretty frequently. I'd say it's directly proportional to how many watts you're going to be able to do. It's funny. I have a couple teammates on the track side who don't have a background from road. They actually come from mountain biking or ski racing and other disciplines. And basically, they may have this massive threshold in a more upright position, but they're missing 30 or 40 watts in a TT position. And so their biggest kind of goal that they've set for themselves is just to recreate that threshold on their TT bike. Because it's like not doing your base training. If you're not comfortable in that position, you're not going to be able to do the same watts, and you're just a completely different athlete in that position.
Yeah. So
would you say do endurance and hard rides on it, or just your threshold sessions, or where are you guys at with that also?
Everything. Everything. Especially team pursuit, you have to be able to ride really, really hard in that position. And so if you're not doing both your zone 2, zone 3, upwards to zone 6, like, you're just not going to be able to hold that position for very long, or you're just going to severely break down. And then once your position breaks down at however fast you're going, you're no longer aero, and you've just given up all the watts that you've just trained so hard for.
Yeah, you think of durability and fatigue resistance and all of these things that we pay attention to when we're training for road racing and long events, but power output and like position maintenance are position specific. So yeah, if you're not doing the super high power stuff, even training for 40K, like if you're not doing that, then you're kind of like leaving watts on the table. Because yeah, you take something as seemingly simple as Pronats TT, where it's basically a flat river road, very, very low frills, but there's still undulations. There's like a bridge you have to go over. You're not maintaining speed through that section, or it's kind of unfamiliar to you to do VO2 max in TT bars going 25 miles an hour. Like, all of a sudden, everything else kind of takes a hit, and you're not riding at 31 miles an hour, you're riding at 30 miles an hour, and you can't just pick that speed up out of nowhere. So, yeah, I think that's why body position, being comfortable on the bike and wanting to train on it, is as important as eking out every small gain on race day.
Yeah. Well, that's really good to hear, and I think it highlights. Yeah, I mean, I guess because so many people have only the mindset of I'm going to race this 5 times a year. But the best people, you guys, other people I've heard say, no, I'm riding this all the time to try and be the best. So it's a good reminder just to even hear that. And it kind of comes in the first question then of, we were talking about gearing, and I live in a hilly area. And so people are saying you want one by, but I was doing gear ratios, and to go up some climbs, even on the flat roads or to get to the flat roads, I'm going to be grinding. I think it was like a 39.23, which on 9-10% doesn't sound fun before trying to do a workout or doing that on a longer ride. So Zach, if you kind of brought this up, and then Brendan chime in with what you think, you would recommend it do 2 by for training and then swap it over to 1 by. Can you just give a quick overview of that?
Yeah, totally. So even living in Boulder, and I used to live where you do, and it's super hilly, and um, again, with being able to want to ride your TT bike and enjoy it, I think having the gears necessary to ride endurance pace on it is really important. And so what a lot of us do is, within the team, there's like just cranksets kind of laying around, and you just throw whatever on to train. So with Shimano 12 speed, that's 52.36 or 54.40, with big old cassette in the back, and you don't worry about what it weighs. And that chain gets stretched and has gunk all over it, and all of their drivetrain is somewhat contaminated, and you don't have to worry about it. And then when it's race day, you take off your front derailleur, you hopefully put on some kind of chain catcher, your big old front chain ring, which now are much less expensive and easier to source. I used one from AliExpress for years that cost me like $43. And as a result, you have a completely like sterilized system to race on. So your wax chain, everything else you've cleaned and scrubbed and completely decontaminated. And you just ensure that your race day equipment is as fast as what they say it should be online, and yeah, so the kind of drivetrain efficiency side of things, the big 1 by front chainring, when you're in the middle of the cassette, you get a couple watts of an advantage compared to being kind of at the end of the cassette in the smaller cogs where the chain is a little bit more contorted. And yeah, it just keeps things safe. If you hit a bump and you're in the 14 cassette in the back and you've got a bunch of tension on your front chain ring because it's huge, you're probably not going to throw your chain. Where if you're in the 11 and it's bouncing around, there's not a lot of tension on it, then you're obviously risking something there. And then a front derailleur kind of costs you 2 to 3 watts at speed. And usually this is a whole other rabbit hole, but when we're talking 2 to 3 watts, a lot of people test these things at different speeds. So it basically becomes exponentially more expensive from a watt standpoint the faster you go to have these things on your bike. So, race speeds for Masters Nats, you're going to be going 50K an hour for most of it. So instead of it being 2 to 3 watts, it's 3 to 4 watts or 4 to 5 watts, right? So however that kind of curve ends up working out.
So let me jump in with a newbie question. Chain catcher on a 1 by, does it fall off that often? I would not even think you would need one.
So not in the US, but if you're going to do Masters Worlds, if you're going to do a technical course, if you hit a pothole just because there's a pothole, there's always a chance. And one of the biggest problems is when it lines up perfectly and you kind of like maybe backpedal a little bit and you hit a bump and it flicks off your bike, then getting it back on is a pain. And really the chain catchers nowadays are so low profile that they don't cost you anything. Wolftooth makes some fantastic ones. Like there's all these companies that make just like really well engineered chain catchers that are super simple to put on, doesn't take a lot of thought, and like your chain is absolutely not coming off.
Okay.
But yeah, in Portugal there was like a finishing time trial, and there was a bunch of kind of cobbled sections and bricks and bad pavement. I dropped my chain like 3 times.
Oh, wow.
I've never dropped the chain in the US.
Damn. Okay. Brendan, what's your thought on gearing? Anything that you would add or change from that?
Not really. I'm not the go-to gear guy, but yeah, it's pretty noticeable when you're down in the 12 or the 11. You can kind of feel there's a little bit of that extra resistance just in the chain being stretched and twisted to the end of the cassette. So yeah, my preference would be to have something bigger so that you're staying in the middle of the cassette.
What would you guys say is like bigger for the one by? Are we talking like 58? Because someone said 58 is not going to be big enough. You're going to want 60. And I was like, does that, I mean, and he made the comment like, dude, you're not doing 60 11. You're doing 60 middle of the cassette. Because I'm not telling you that you're Hercules. You don't want to be going down that far. So would you guys just go bigger, or I mean, or maybe even bigger than that? What would you say?
It seems like 62 is the limit. That's what I've seen.
Yeah, especially with a chain catcher, you have to have some bracket, some front derailleur bracket space to be able to put the chain catcher on and attach it. So if you have like a 100 tooth chain ring, it's going to hit that bracket.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so yeah, I've always run a 60 because that was the biggest thing I could find on AliExpress. Um, but for non-hilly courses, anything from a 58 to a 62 is fine. I think with leg speed being in, kind of the center of the cassette, you're going to be fine. If you're a
Mm-hmm.
real masher, then definitely, get something a little bit bigger. But I think that range is good. You know,
Okay.
um,
Brendan, has track changed your crank arm length at all?
It has actually quite
How
dramatically.
tall are you? How tall are you? What do you used to ride on the road? What do you ride on the TT bike, and what do you ride on the track?
So I've been on 175s my whole life. At context, I'm 192 centimeters, which is like 6'3", I think translates to.
Mm-hmm.
Um, yeah, I've always ridden 60 centimeter frames, like big bikes. And recently, there's this whole trend to go to smaller cranks. The idea being that when you switch to the smaller cranks, it opens up your hip angle and you're able to flatten out your back, flatten out your chest, and you're just cutting through the rig a little bit better. And I think the other piece of that is when you're on the smaller cranks, it's just a little bit easier to kind of move your legs around underneath you. Whereas if you've got these bigger crank arms, you're kind of thrashing at the pedals when you're in this folded up position. Your knees are hitting your chest. Um, so I'm a little bit of a dramatic case in that I've switched on my track bike. This is not on my road bike. I now ride 155s on the
Whoa!
track.
Did not see that coming.
Yeah.
What
So
would
that
you
is
do on
not
a
the
road?
case. Yeah, that is not the case for everybody, and part of it is I don't think Shimano even makes anything smaller than a 160. Um,
and those are rare.
but
You got to know somebody to get 160s.
yeah, um, but yeah, we're on whatever the SRM cranks are, and I think you can go even smaller if you really want to.
What would you do on a TT bike for the road these days if you were building one up right now?
I would probably go as short as possible still. Um, yeah, I think I have 165s, but yeah, my preference would be to find some 160s.
Wow. Yeah, I've been on 177 fives on the road forever, and then went to 172 fives this year, and I think I'm gonna go 170. If I go below that, getting the saddle high enough is usually a problem for me. Um, so we've like done some measurements, and 170 should definitely work. If I go lower, I'll risk that. So I'm like, all right, I'm gonna probably stick to 170. But that's interesting. Okay,
Yeah,
Zach, any thoughts on crank arm length besides that?
I'm kind of with Brendan on just go short. I'm also on the complete other end of the spectrum where
Yeah.
like I'm 174 centimeters tall on my best days. So I run 165 on the road bike, 165 on the TT bike just because of availability. But I would go short. I would experiment. And there's actually some pretty good aftermarket stuff if people wanted to experiment like cheaply now. Croter is a brand that makes like $99 crank arms that are cork compatible, um, and you can get whatever size you want. So that's my off season project is see how short makes sense to go, and how short feels like it's like a funny bike, and it's like you can't really dig into it.
So since you brought up cork, this makes a good point of then Shimano or SRAM, and what power meter would you use to be able to go back and forth between 2 by and 1 by?
So as long as you're using like a I don't know. So we have been on Shimano for several years now, and it seems like it just works. And I've never had any complaints with Shimano. Um, so that's what we run, and that's my partially biased opinion. I think for switching, because of the kind of SRAM 1 by built-in power meter kind of situations, it would make sense to be on Shimano. Um, because with Shimano, you can just order a crankset and it has chain rings, and that's perfect for training. And then all you have to do is take them off, put an aftermarket chainring on that's compatible with whatever drivetrain, and bam, you're like good to go. And it's a 5-minute process. You don't have to take your crank off. You can just do it. Um, and with that, we work with 4i, and they've been awesome this year. They're going to continue to support the team. Um, so no issues. 2 by power meter, not super expensive. Previous to this year, I've only ever spent my money on corks. They work great. When they stop working great, Korg is incredible at customer service. So outside of that, I have no experience. I know the track team's on SRM, which has been the gold standard for 2 decades. But yeah, my opinion on power meters is pretty limited. If people have one that works, I think that's good. If they've had good customer service experience, they feel like it's consistent from bike to bike. Those things are important. But yeah, I'm not a power meter hater. I think people should find somebody that they connect with and is a price that they can afford, and just go with it.
What do you think, Brendan? Same thing. You're using SRM on the road also because of the track, or are you doing the 4i, or what are you up to?
Yeah, the SRMs are the just the power meters that everybody has on the track with the national team, but I've just been using 4i all year, so not a whole lot of choice there. But in my experience, it's not. It's more about trying to stay with something consistently. Because if you're switching between all different types of power meters, they're all going to read slightly different on different days.
Yeah, I've always been cork and always been Shimano, and so I'm leaning towards just trying to stick with that. And exactly, you kind of said that those would mesh well and be able to swap easily. And I hate doing bike work, so I have talked to like the mechanics here. I'm like, and I'm gonna pay them, but I'm like, yo, are you guys cool like swapping this stuff back and forth when I have a big race? Because I guess to the gearing aspect, like 5440. I would maybe just ride that at some local TTs. Like when it's like, okay, if I spin out and I don't have enough gear, whatever. I lost 10 seconds today, and maybe just change it over for nationals and something big. But
I was going to say, you say that now, and then you're going to win or lose by 1 second, one time, and you're going to go off the deep end of aero nerdery. And I mean, poor Steven Vogel and I traded 1 second win losses like 10 times over 2 years. And at that point, it was like, tell me what to buy. I don't want to ever do this again. You know what I mean? Like, I want to win by 2 seconds and not have to sweat it.
I'm already proud of myself for like as deep as I'm getting into this before. I wish I had a picture to post up of like my setup before. And people were like, dude, you will definitely be faster than before. Just, like, you can't get slower. Speaking of then the cockpit, which and maybe I'm overthinking this, sounds super important, and I had shot this over just in email, so you guys might not have seen it. One thing that people were asking was, hey, what's your reach? What are your dimensions? You have to know all this before you set this up with the goal, and correct me if I'm wrong here, have the hands by the face as much as possible so that angulation, which is the UCI rule 20 degrees, or am I making that up?
can start with that. I think so. They changed it from 15 to 30 degrees. I don't know if that was that last year, 2 years ago, 2022. And then they enforced these height categories. So, Brendan, what's your height again in centimeters?
6'5", so I think it's like one.
Okay, so you're definitely So it goes less than 180. Yeah, it goes less than 180 centimeters. These are height categories 1, 2, and 3. Less than 180, 180 to 190, and then 190 plus. So you would definitely be in the 190 plus category.
And that means I can do more degrees, or sorry, more height.
Yeah, you get a longer reach and more height, like stack height. But everyone now gets the 30 degrees if you want it. It used to be max 15, but now it's 30, which is pretty aggressive when you see someone actually set up with the full 30 degrees. So I'm just looking at a little page here from the UCI rulebook, but yeah, you now have 850 millimeters of reach from the bottom bracket to the tips of the extension, and you now have 140 millimeters of stack, which I guess is, I don't know if it's from the center of the pads there or if it's from the base bar, but I'm pretty sure it's center of the pads to the tips.
Yep.
Tips of the extension.
Center pads. Okay. Cool. So is that correct then? Like most aero is try to hide behind your hands as much as possible, or what's the tip there when people are setting up? Because what I got was this Metron TFA bar that seemed pretty like I could probably resell it and maybe have it as a backup. Because once I started looking at these really expensive aero coach and everything else, I'm like, I don't even know like my measurements. So I thought start basic with $1,000 piece of equipment, and then maybe go more if it's going to make that much of a difference. What do you guys think about that?
Yeah, I mean, it can make an enormous difference. In our experience doing some testing, the more you can get your hands in front of your head with your shoulders tucked in, the bigger a difference it's going to make. So recently we've all gone to this really aggressive 30-degree angle, and with the extensions like basically completely maxed out. And so it actually feels pretty upright. It's a little bit of a strange feeling. You feel like your hands are so high. It's so foreign compared to previous setups that you're like, this can't be aero. But then you look at the data and you're like, well, actually, it's pretty fast. So I don't know. It's like whatever is most comfortable is generally going to be fastest. Because you can just pedal harder. You can actually hold the handlebars. I think that was one of the biggest problems with the older setups with the lower kind of angle, is that you're kind of riding this bike with your hands like below your waist, and you couldn't steer the bike, you couldn't control the bike in any wind. And now it really feels like you're a lot more locked in. And if you can really push with your glutes and when you're just more upright, you're able to do more power, and ultimately you can be as air as you want. But if you can't pedal as hard as you can, then it's not worth anything.
What do you think, Zach? What was your super fast setup in Cockpit?
Yeah, pretty similar, Brendan. Obviously, like maximizing your reach is something that's pretty important, just because it allows you to kind of like sink into the bike a little bit more. And really, to your question, like selecting equipment, adjustability is something that I would focus on more than like the most highly customized piece of front end equipment. Because the more you ride the bike, the more you're going to learn about, the position that you feel most comfortable in. And if you can't get there and you have to like Dremel something out or buy an entirely like new front end of your bike, like that's very frustrating, and so trying to target something that's adjustable more than this sleek piece of kit especially when you're outfitting a bike for the first time in several years, is a super smart move. So, you know, get a whole bunch of extra stack riser pieces and just be willing to kind of like tinker around with things and, you know, eyeball it. And what'll happen over the course of a couple months is your own aero wind tunnel eyeballs will kind of adjust to your body and how it sits on a bike, and you'll start noticing like how you actually want to sit on it, right? And what's too tall and what's too low and those kind of things, just by riding.
I always found that interesting when you had made the comment that your eyes are a great wind tunnel, and it's like, you know, you can get yourself 95% there. I forget exactly, you know, how you had said it before, but that's kind of, I'm hoping to be part of like a little winter project. I'm actually getting my hands on a trainer because I haven't had a bike trainer since I lived in upstate New York, so many years ago. And I'm like, well, maybe I'll ride the trainer and I'll set up a camera and I'll get on this TT bike and just be like, okay, it's Saturday morning. I'm bored as hell on Zwift. Let me fiddle with positions, because that's not something I love doing. I don't love. That's one reason why I got kind of never drew into this, is the world has gotten so specific and tinkering, and my friends that love TTs, like, this is what they talk about. I'm like, that's not for me. But now something has like kind of changed. I thought, all right, maybe I'll try and, you know, just start looking, okay, how can I get faster? And I also feel like this would then really help on the road, because then your brain is just sort of thinking this way. I don't think aero that often. It's more like just crush watts, and I will definitely get faster if I put a little bit more effort into trying to be less of a tall, huge person on a bike.
And I think to that point, like maybe this is like literally the Rhim special of like when you know like stuff is about to happen in a bike race, it's because Rhim's face is like 3 inches from his handlebars, and he's like tucked in the group, and you're like, yeah, we're all done, like job done. He's gonna just go win, you know. And I think to that effect, like you can do as much power as you want, but if you can do almost that much power in a super aerodynamically efficient position, like it makes you very hard to catch. And you know, you see it at the world tour level, right? Like these guys, everything is now being considered from an aerodynamic eye, because it's so important at the speeds that they race.
Really good point. Let's talk disc wheels. Is there a difference amongst all these wheels? I saw very expensive wheels. I saw $1,500 wheel. I'm sure there's a $900 wheel. Like, what's the importance of this?
I, I'm thinking I'm more along the lines of like the rear disc wheel is important, but the front is really not that important. And that may be a little bit against what the industry is going to tell you. And yeah, you're probably giving up at least 5 or 10 watts on that front wheel. But depending on yaw angles and where you're racing, it's oftentimes faster to just use a shallower wheel and not go with the super expensive tri-spoke or whatever it's going to be. So, yeah, there was that whole thing about Wout using the front disc at the Olympics. And first of all, it's like the sketchiest way to ride a bike in the
Yeah.
world. Like, I can tell you from experience, riding a front disc outdoors is one of the worst things you can do. It is actually terrifying. So I'm assuming there was no wind in Paris, or whatever the conditions were allowed him to do that. But I think he gained, they said, like 10 or 15 watts for using that wheel. And in my mind, that is just not worth it. Like, you're fighting the bike so much trying to control that front wheel that you're easily losing that in other areas. So, yeah, I'm big proponent of shallower is better. I don't think one of the only places where it's really worth buying the super fancy wheel is in a velodrome, and most people aren't racing indoors because that's the controlled environment where you're not going to really run into these high yaw angles. So, yeah, what do you think, Zach? For me, it's not.
Yeah,
It's
I
not where I'd
think,
spend my money.
and we were kind of speaking about this the other day, and I think sometimes wheel testing that they publish is some of the most misleading data, because they have to have the best wheel, right? Otherwise, why would they even post the data? So I think specifically with disc wheels, Having a disc wheel and having it be wide enough that the tire you put on the disc wheel sits flush and the tire does not spill over the sides, um, is like a huge gain over not having a disc wheel. But the margin of gain, and maybe this is like one of those watts saved per dollar spent kind of calculations, from what we would call like maybe the worst or at least the most value conscious disc wheel to the best is very small. It's very expensive per watt saved to spend more money on a nicer disc wheel. And to your point, the one that you sent us, it was super lightweight, and that's cool. But the time trials that you have picked out do not require a specific amount of like total system weight. It doesn't matter as much as aerodynamic efficiency, because the speed is so high and the gradients are so shallow that you're never in a situation where it's a watts per kilo contest as much as it is a watts per CDA contest. And so all that to say, like, get a disc wheel, make sure that the tire you put on it fits really nicely, and past that, I would just not give it a second thought. Because to get, Princeton Carbon Works or one of these like extremely nice disc wheels is like $4,000.
Yeah.
Which is every other upgrade that we'll talk about on this call costs you way less than $4,000 combined. You know,
you could go to a wind tunnel for $4,000.
Yeah. So, something, the one that you sent us seemed fantastic. Head has always made just amazing products, super well built products, and they are available secondhand, pretty cheap from their website, super cheap. The hubs are great. All of those things, they don't ever run out of true. We've used them for years, but find what you like the look of that fits your budget, and that is wide internal, and then don't use it forever and just don't think about it.
That's what I was going to ask you. So the tire size will depend on the wheel so that it's flush. With everybody going kind of bigger on the road, is that same trend on the TT, like 30 or 30? I mean, is 30 as big as you can go? Or because I'm riding 32s on the road, but I think that would spill over, as you were saying.
Definitely spill over. I think it's supposed to be, the tire is meant to be 5% narrower than the rim. Correct me, is that right, Zach?
I believe so. So yeah, if your internal rim, like on kind of a classic new age disc brake disc wheel would be like a 21 internal, you'd probably put a 25C tire on there, because and that's about it. So
I need to buy some new tires.
Yeah. Or buy some old tires.
Yeah. Well said.
Yeah. But yeah, it's somewhat substantial to have a larger tire than the rim profile of your wheel. So yeah, definitely just like do the old finger test and just like run your fingers over both sides of it, and if you feel like you're catching the rim as you're kind of like working over that piece, that's good. If you're just touching it, you just don't want to feel like you're having to like pinch to find the rim on the other side of the tire.
Meaning, if you put your fingers over it this way?
Yep. So make a U with your two fingers and just drop them straight over your tire. And you want to kind of just feel the rim without moving your fingers. But if you're having a pinch to find the rim a little bit, then your tire's too big.
How many watts is that?
It depends.
Okay.
So there's tires with aerodynamic profiling on them, and those can save you watts. But if this whole system is kind of janky, then they definitely cost you watts.
Okay. And then gear, we can put it all in one. Helmet, skin suit. Are there clear-cut winners in 2024?
Absolutely. I think, super generically, you can start with, I think, two of the most mainstream helmets, and that's going to be the Arrowhead and the Mistral. So that would be the Giro Arrowhead and the Cast Mistral. Generally test quite well on just about everybody. So
What
that
was
would
the
be a
second one
good
called?
place to start.
Cask
The Cast Mistral. It's kind of just the
Mistral.
round looking one with a few little vents in the front. It's
Okay.
pretty much what almost every athlete was using at the Olympics.
Wow.
Yeah, if you look at a picture from our team from the last 4 years, everybody's been on a Mistral. And we've gone to the tunnel with kind of the purpose of like, we want to try helmets and like prove that this Mistral is not as good as we think it is. And every time you leave with the same helmet that you went in with, you know, and
Wow.
that's with the POC Tempor and the Specialized and just like down the road. I think the Mistral, if you're using the eyeball wind tunnel, the Mistral and the Arrowhead are clear winners. And yeah, they've been really, really good for a long time, which is cool.
Yeah, unfortunately, we've not gotten our hands on the new Arrowhead, the super crazy cone shaped looking one, but you know, I'm just frothing to get my hands on that at some point. Just looks crazy.
Okay. And then skin suit is, I feel like I see people wearing a generic, not a generic, a non-team kit when they're racing at amateur races. I never cared enough to ask them what it was, and or am I misseeing this? Is there like a fast skin suit that is a must-buy?
I don't think there's a brand.
Okay.
Skin suits are so dependent from person to person. So what may be fast on you is not fast on another person. And again, it comes down to your body shape and how everything's interacting with the air in front of you, the air behind you. So yeah, pretty tough to make a sweeping recommendation on a skin suit, but a couple good things to look for. First thing is the arms. So from your elbow to your shoulder, that's kind of seen as this key area that's causing a lot of what they call pressure drag. And that's kind of a concentration of high pressure in front and a concentration of like lower pressure behind this object that's not moving kind of straight through the air, but is moving like a brick. So it's just like this solid line. It's not what you want. Basically, there's certain shapes you can't avoid, like on your legs and your shoulders, from your elbow to your shoulder, that are unavoidable. And so it's all about optimizing those areas as much as possible. So the first thing you should really be looking for is a skin suit that has ribbed material or a double layered. And this whole double layered thing is we can go really into the weeds here. But yeah, you're looking for trips, either single layered ribbing or a double layered textured material between the elbow and the shoulders. And again, it's like there's a lot of marketing, there's a lot of hype, but some companies go out and say whatever they want, but may not have any data to back it up. So you can make all these claims, but ultimately it's about putting these things on and testing them, because what might test well on one person is not going to test well on you, and you just don't know.
So, two quick questions. Is it always long sleeve always better than, short sleeve always better than long sleeve?
So most of the time, fabric is faster than skin.
Okay.
And that's why we cover up as much as we can. But yeah, I think the skin suit is the most it depends kind of item of clothing. But one thing that as we're looking at skin suit development over the last couple of years, the fit has come a long way. And so now there's this principle of minimum stretch that everybody is trying to adopt as best they can. Because when you put a fabric under tension, wrinkles will occur as it's trying to fit over your body in relation to how it's cut. So the current kind of idea is to get a skin suit that fits snug, not tightly, so that whatever aerodynamic fabric and designing they put into the skin suit is going to be optimized and like useful to you. Because if you have, let's say the classic kind of tripped fabric of if it's just like lines with indentations in between them and it's very stretched, the like depth of the valleys between the trip lines are less because the fabric is under so much tension that it essentially becomes flatter. So anything that is designed purposefully in a skin suit, you want it to exist in its original condition. And so if you normally wear a medium in kind of your speed suit, the smallest size skin suit you would get is a medium. And it's so different than this old style of get the tightest thing you can possibly squeeze your body into. Long gone are those days. Now it's get the thing that wrinkles the least without feeling like it's flappy.
Okay. So this is good. This is some more things people can do, just eye tests. Like, does this look like it fits you and it's not flapping in the wind when you're training, and look around and
Right.
so I mean, am I right? Like, eyeball test can go a long way with the skin suit.
Yeah. Find something that looks like it fits you smoothly. And some of that is kind of, working your body around, checking it out in your time trial position. But making sure that you're not purchasing things that are going to be too tight on you is extremely important, because wrinkles will occur as you sweat. The fabric will deform if it's under stretch to a high degree just over the course of a time trial. And it'll bunch in areas, and it'll be the exact area you don't want it to bunch in. So your shoulder girdle, it'll pull on your arms, it'll collect kind of in the crevices between your hips. And those are areas of like high air activity. And those creases and crinkles basically redirect airflow in ways that we don't. They're like incalculable because they're inconsistent. So yeah, find something that fits and go with that. And
I like that. That sounds easier than I was a little intimidated by this. And then I think I know the answer to the last two. Then shoe covers and aero socks are a must.
they are. And
Okay.
yeah, and I think Brendan has tested these things more than me, but my piece is look for something that has data on it that is similar to the speeds at which you're going to race it in. So we're sponsored by Defeat. Defeat makes an unbelievably fast product across all kinds of different speeds. That data is available. If you want to use something that's not Defeat, look for the contextualized data. So if you're racing on a flat road and you're doing a whole lot of watts, you're probably going to be racing faster than 45K an hour. You're probably going to be racing at 50K an hour. And you need to find socks and overshoes and things that have been proven and tested and designed to race at those speeds.
Brendan, any aero thoughts there?
We have this whole not a fight, but it's a this debate about just getting your socks to stay up, because some aero socks you use them twice and then you can't pull them up anymore. And some guys started showing up to races with this spray on glue and all these other kind of bizarre items that you'd never think is bike racing kit. But yeah, the spray on tacky glue is now being passed around in the bus before races, because we're just trying to hold everything up and just make everything stay in place. So again, what Zach said is skin is generally slow, and going back to the forearm, elbows to shoulders, like your shins are just as important. It's like one of the least aero things moving through the air. So one of your biggest bangs for your buck is going to come from, again, your jersey, but also the socks that you're wearing. I think it's generally understood that there's at least 15 watts that you can get from wearing a good pair of aero socks at minimum, and then that could be up to 30 watts, depending on the socks you're wearing. And again, I think it's also one of the reasons why the UCI has made this rule that you can't wear them past the halfway point between your basically your knee and your ankle. Otherwise, people would be wearing them all the way up because there is so much benefit from having
You see
a more
triathletes with those like really huge ones that go over the calf, it seems like. And any last thoughts? This was awesome. You guys actually made me feel less intimidated by this, so I really appreciate you talking about it, because as I started getting into this, and there's so, like, you know, the guy who's helped me put the bike together at Roadies here, he's like, okay, what about this? I'm like, dude, I don't know the answer to any of these questions, so I feel good about this. What did I miss anything? Or maybe any random things that you guys were like, you should do this?
So
Or to
yeah,
anybody else listening?
we've got some like little bonuses if people make it to the end of the podcast, right? So
Yeah,
one of the
let's
things,
go.
is shoes. If you're planning on having a separate pair of shoes for time trialing, they should be lace ups. And basically, lace ups are lower total profile. The BOA is a round shape, which is the worst shape aerodynamically. So removing the BOA is one part of it, and then the laces themselves act like trip lines. So on the top of your foot, you now have 8 trip lines to help divert this air. So lace-up shoes, either under shoe covers or just by themselves. Again, based on the fit, and if your shoe covers are falling down in the middle of a race, then don't use those. But so lace-up shoes are a gain. And then if you're on like traditional SPD SL kind of pedals, like Shimano, Look, that kind of thing, and you're not racing a UCI race, you can tape the bottom of your pedals, and it's like 3 watts.
I might do that.
Getting into the weeds here.
But these are the little bonuses.
You guys were good about staying on service, but I think a little bit of these weeds in the bonus section is good.
Okay, and Brendan, tell them about the radio. Tell them about the thing that everybody hates.
Well, you've seen people start moving the radio from the traditional back position to other places underneath the jersey. So, coming from triathlon, people were stuffing bottles down the front of their jersey, and I think the triathlon, I don't know who makes the rules over there, Triathlon USA,
USTA.
They banned the bottles down the front of the shirt because, I don't know, first of all, it looks ridiculous. You probably lose some control. And there's a huge aerodynamic gain. So one of the things that's going on is you have this massive pocket of like negative space between your arms, your chest, and your legs, and you're trying to fill in that space with whatever you possibly can. And that's why you've seen some people start moving the radio or anything else they can think of to the front of their jersey. And it tests very well.
Wow. So in thinking of the position, though, if you're like this, how does that matter?
So basically what you're trying to do is direct air around your body in consistent ways. And so by having a fairing in the center of your chest, you're encouraging that air to vent out basically, your hips and your armpits without hitting your groin area and getting all tangled up with your legs moving up and down. And so you're just trying to channel air more consistently throughout your effort. And so that's like one of the things that we didn't really mention was like, be in a position where you can see mostly and you feel comfortable and confident in that position for the duration of your effort. So mostly means you're not like, you can't see like the McDonald's sign and see what the like special of the day is on whatever, but you can see the road, you can see people, you can see cars, you can see stuff going on, and the consistency with which you hold your head basically ensures consistency in the aerodynamics of your position. Your head is going up and down. You're basically creating perturbations in the air around you and how it flows over your body. And it takes time once you've reset your position for the aerodynamics to reset. So you basically want to be solid as a rock and have as much control over how the air flows over your body as possible. And so that's in effect, like why position is so important and why we use the radios as just one more direction for the air to flow around your body.
Hell yeah. This is awesome. Guys, thank you. Really appreciate you doing this. Let me put in here, you guys are on Instagram. What about other places? Do you guys do blogs, or we'll put in like Project Echelon stuff? Where can people follow you at the end of? Well, Brendan, you've got the Track Worlds coming up. I don't know if this will be out before then, but track team stuff and Echelon stuff. Where should we send people to follow you guys?
Project Echelon on Instagram. I think that's the primary place
IG
of
is the
everything.
spot.
Yeah.
Sick.
We don't have
Everybody, thanks for tuning in. Good luck with your TT efforts, and let us know how much faster you get from the pod. And we'll talk to you guys later.